This is Face the State for Sunday, May 4th. May the 4th be with you. The start of 4 more years of President Trump is underway. We're looking at the effect of all those executive orders in the first 100 days with Congressman Meuser, including recent cuts to PBS and NPR. May also means it is already time for another election. We have the Secretary of State Al Schmidt on to get you ready for that, and a big deadline tomorrow. And our insiders are talking about a new bill to potentially block lawmakers from trading stocks. Interesting, right? May the votes be with you. Next on Face the State.
CBS 21 News presents Face the State with Joel D. Smith, a look at the issues and politics that shape Pennsylvania.
All right, folks, let's get started right here. My first guest this morning, one of the most vocal supporters of President Trump in Pennsylvania. It is Republican Congressman Meuser. Welcome back to the show.
Joel, great to be with you.
We have a lot to talk about. We just got past the first 100 days. What's the biggest success? What do you like the most?
Well, I'll tell you what, the sentiment coming out of Pennsylvania, the sentiment coming out of my district is quite positive. Unlike what you hear in most of the media, people have a sense of hope. People know, I hear all the time, they're just happy to know that they've got somebody fighting for them. And that's why I'm there with President Trump. We are fighting for America. He puts it as America first. But it is about very much as well reversing the actions and initiatives and policies of the previous administration that people, as we clearly know, voted strongly against throughout Pennsylvania and throughout the country. I mean, we corrected the border, Joel. I mean, we had 7,000, 8,000 only a year ago illegals coming across a day. Today, it's down to less than 100 a day.
Yeah, the border's the big one.
Yep. The fentanyl is down. That means the human trafficking is down. So people have a sense of hope. And obviously transparency, and that the things are only going to get better from here.
We always point that out. You know, we do a lot of stories on how these things have affected people, whether it's the tariffs or whatever. And yes, there's some negative outcomes on some of those people, but we're always quick to point out a lot of people like what's happening as well. So you pointed that out as well. But I want to get to some challenges on these things. A lot of this stuff's being done by executive action, which lends itself to court challenges because sometimes those things can't be done by executive action, even though it does get the ball rolling. Governor Shapiro, in particular, announcing this week that he joined the lawsuit to challenge some of the president's cuts as well. What's your take on the give and take here instead of going through Congress to try to get this stuff in a more traditional way?
What he's doing is constitutional. If it's not, the Supreme Court will overturn it, and we'll certainly call them on it. We take an oath of office. So we are going to be looking over time to codify many of the president's actions, but many are within his authority, of course. I mean, you know, he's certainly not the first president to be issuing executive orders. It's a lot for the first 100 days. Franklin Roosevelt's the only one who had more executive orders, but Barack Obama was not too far behind during his first 100 days. Look, President Trump's been in office once before. This time around, he is very serious about staying on Trump time, if you will, with a real sense of urgency, the type of urgency that you have when you enter a business and that business needs turnaround because America needs a turnaround. And do it in relatively short order.
Is that what Trump time is, doing stuff fast?
Yes, I think it is. It's doing things fast, but it's being very persistent, being on top of things and managing to the point of micromanaging if necessary.
Is defunding or taking away federal funding from PBS, NPR, is that something you think the executive order can do, or should that be part of the budget, just pulling it out of there when it comes to that kind of funding?
I'm not exactly sure yet. I mean, the president issued this and yesterday, I believe, or last week, and we will determine that. Now, here's the deal, right? We've got over $37 trillion in national debt. Our deficit spending is almost $2 trillion. Our service on our debt is $1 trillion. Joel, we've got a real serious fiscal financial crisis in our country. And it needs to be recognized and it needs to be dealt with. We've got to go from the nice to haves to the must haves. I don't think anybody will argue there's a lot of TV channels out there. There's a lot of media that they can get with that isn't supported through government funding. So PBS NPR, they need to make a case for themselves. If they think the American taxpayer should be affording them subsidies and millions of dollars, tens of millions, for them to be on the air, they need to make the case for
Well,
it. So
they've
let
been
them bring
around
it to
forever.
the
You know their case. Do you buy it or not? Do you think they should be funded?
I'm going to have to review that a little bit closer because I think there's some value to NPR and PBS, but whether or not the American taxpayer should be funding it, right out of the gate, even just stating it is probably categorically no.
Okay. I want to get to some more things that might end up in the budget, maybe not, but there's been a call from President Trump to do a 15% cut to the VA, and so that would be 80,000 employees nationwide when it comes to it. The other part of that's come up recently, just this past week, is ending that new mortgage rescue program for veterans that helped out about 20,000 try to avoid foreclosure. The big VA in Lebanon, it was within your district. What's your take on the effects that will happen here?
Well, look, I've got nearly 60,000 veterans in my district. Multiply that by their family members who are affected by the service and the commitment that those individuals made to our country. We have in the Commonwealth almost 900,000 veterans. I are very supportive of our veterans, as is our president, as is our Republican caucus, and I'd venture to say our Democrat caucus. Doug Collins, the new VA secretary, is a friend of mine. He's very committed. He's a veteran himself. He's not going to do anything that diminishes benefits or services to our veterans. And we will see what happens there. If there's any concern about less services, my constituents know they can come to me and I'll be weighing in on their behalf.
Yeah, I hear you on the big numbers, but specifically on this program that was just ended, it's 20,000 veterans would have avoided foreclosure. They're talking about, this rescue program in particular. Are you concerned about that one, if you're going to really look at specific pieces?
Yeah, honestly, I've heard some about that. My understanding is it's going to be transferred into a different fund,
okay,
but still made available. So I'll have to get back to you fully on that.
Gotcha. Last thing, about what happened at the governor's residence, that arson there. They're talking about public hearings on this, or maybe not necessarily so public because it is a security issue and maybe some failings that were there. What is your take on maybe coming full on that, or maybe redacting some of it and then revealing the rest to the public?
Well, Joe, look, I'm just simply for transparency. The public can handle it, so I don't know why there wouldn't be a review that the public was made aware of. It is the people's house, the governor's residence, so that should be taken care of. And I'll just add this: look, we denounced that firebombing or attack on the governor's mansion and stated inaccurately that I blamed him partially for some of his rhetoric as to why this attack took place. That was false, and the governor knows it. What I did do, though, a few days after, I did accuse, and rightfully so, the governor stated that President Trump was taking food out of hungry Pennsylvanians' mouths, and he knows that was very false. He's got plenty of funding, and more is on its way for that, and the two are not related whatsoever. So the idea that the governor wanted to play political games on both issues is, politics, and I like taking care of business well before politics.
Okay, well, you took care of business today, so thanks for being on the Face the State again, and I'm sure we'll see you in the future. Dan Meuser.
Thanks, Joe.
Good to see you. All right, the May primary, right around the corner, folks. We have a deadline to talk about tomorrow as well. The Secretary of the State is coming up next to answer all kinds of questions. Stick around. So let's get right to it, folks. I can smell the voting from here. That means we're pretty close, and that means it's time to get ready for the primary, and we welcome back to the show. It is the Secretary of the Commonwealth from the Department of State. It is Al Schmidt. Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
We always like to get us primed and ready when the primary is on the way. Let's start with this. Tomorrow is a big date, May 5th.
That's right, May 5th, my mom's birthday. So
that's the first
happy
reason.
birthday,
Don't
Mom.
forget that, yeah.
Is the deadline to register to vote in Pennsylvania. So if you haven't registered yet, tomorrow's the deadline. If you need to change your name or change your address or anything else like that, that's the deadline tomorrow. So don't wait
And we know it's a closed primary. We'll get more into that in a second. But we have to keep in mind, let's say you're registered independent and you say, oh, I forgot, I really want to vote in the primary. Can you make that change tomorrow still?
You can. Up until May 5th, you can register to vote or make any of the other changes, including changing your party. In Pennsylvania, as you know, we have a closed primary state. So only Democrats can vote for Democratic candidates in the primary, and only Republicans can vote for Republican candidates in the primary. Many counties in Pennsylvania have ballot questions or other things on the ballot that independents are eligible to vote for. Independents, Green Party people, Libertarians, any other. But otherwise, we have what's called a closed primary system.
We go back and forth with different people thinking about changing that. What's the latest right now? Is there any more bills to try to change that and make it more of an open primary?
Yeah, it's been on and off a push for open primaries in Pennsylvania. By open primaries, like they have in other states, it really means that regardless of your party registration, you can vote for any candidate for a nomination in a primary.
But you would only get one ballot, though, right?
You would only get one ballot, and and there are arguments for it, there are arguments against it. The argument against it would be, should Republicans be selecting who the Democratic candidate is or nominating Democratic candidate, or vice versa, or anything else?
True, but I will point out that you can switch whenever you want, and you can flood the system anyway if you really felt like trying to impact the other side, because it's really easy to switch back and forth.
You can, and you can do so electronically by going to the Department of State's website to change your party, to change your registration or affiliation or anything like that.
I have a confession. I switch back and forth all the time. I go to whatever the most interesting primary is. I want to be involved in that one, so I jump back and forth all the time.
Yeah, plenty of people do. It's not difficult.
Right. Let's get to what else is happening here. The primary is May 20th. Anything else you want people to really know and think about going in?
I think running elections, and I ran elections in a county in Philadelphia or in Pennsylvania for about 10 years, is it's always difficult to see the whiplash between high turnout elections for presidentials and low turnout elections like this one typically is. But one thing that I think a lot of voters miss is these elections have a bigger impact on your life than who the president of the United States is.
Directly,
like in Harrisburg, you're voting for mayor.
Yep.
In Philadelphia, you're voting for a district attorney.
And in many places, let's take Harrisburg, for instance, the primary turns out to almost be the general election because of how highly concentrated Democrats in this case are in a place like Harrisburg. Brings up an interesting thing for me. Recently in a debate, Wanda Williams, who is the incumbent for mayor in Harrisburg, said that if she loses the primary, she may still run. Explain to people how that could happen.
It's a little bit complicated in Pennsylvania because we have a sore loser, what's called a sore loser clause, or a sore loser law, meaning that if you run in one primary, you can't then try to get on the ballot as an independent or something in the general. There's a couple ways that candidates try to write-ins. One way that could get around it, like if somebody's running in a primary for one party and a sufficient number of people write in that candidate in the other party, they could potentially be that other party's candidate. And it's happened before. It's just, it's definitely a long shot.
It's meant to be difficult for a reason. You already had one election that you should have gone through. So it's kind of interesting to think about that.
It's like a two bite at the apple kind of
situation. It is. One more question about looking back before we look forward. Anything from the November election that caught your eye that said, hey, we did that great, or, oh, I want to do this a little bit better?
One, I think, interesting thing to observe is there's been greater Republican embrace of mail ballot voting, which was not the case a few years ago. But ultimately, regardless of your party, regardless of your method, to us, all that matters is that voters make their voice heard and that they take and they exercise their right to vote in every election, not just presidentials, but ones like this.
Well, speaking of the result from 2024, Donald Trump wins. He's had an executive order. He was trying to make it so voter ID would be required for federal elections. It did get struck down by a judge at the time we're talking about this. That's still the case. But how do you prepare for things like that when at any moment, it seems, things could change again, and all of a sudden there'll be a different way to vote? What's been the process to get ready for something?
I think the most important thing to realize is that an executive order is not the law. An executive order is an executive order to executive branch offices at the federal level, which is different from federal election law, which is different from Pennsylvania election law. So that's why it's going to go continue to work its way through the courts. to determine what authority a president actually has to change the law at the federal or state level.
But how closely are you watching these kind of
Oh,
debates?
we're watching it very, very closely. There's a lot of litigation around it. You know, the most important thing in running elections for us is not only that every voter casts their vote and makes their voice heard, but you want certainty when it comes to elections. You don't want a lot of changes. You definitely don't want them at the last minute. It's not fair to the people who run elections, and it's certainly not fair to voters when things are changing at the last minute. So certainty is very important.
Do we have certainty when it comes to mail-in ballots and what's on the outside, when it comes to if there was a minor error with a date or a signature and whether or not those can be counted?
So Pennsylvania Department of State last year, we redesigned the outer envelope that has resulted in a significant decrease in voters making a mistake when completing it. And all they need to do is sign it and write that day's date when they completed it. So that's been a big improvement. But you're right, it's gone back and forth in the courts. The last court decision was that ballots should be counted even though the voter didn't date it. But there's been a lot of back and forth, a lot of conflicting judicial opinions. So I would just encourage voters to follow the directions. They're very simple. Yep. Sign it and put that day's date.
And it has to get there by the day of the election on the 20th.
It has to be returned by that time.
Okay. Well, you sound ready to me. Do you feel ready?
I am.
Okay.
Been doing this a little while, and it's never boring.
It's never boring. That's why we have you on every once in a while, just to make sure everybody's ready for it as well. Thanks for being on again.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Good to see you. Al Schmidt, everybody. There you go. Coming up next, we're going to talk more about this, but also some other things that are happening in Pennsylvania. Oh, yes, you're going to want to hear this next. Yes, welcome back. It's my favorite time of the week. Our CBS 21 political insiders are here. Democratic strategist Mark Singal, Republican strategist Mike Regan is here. We're going to start with this. Mike Waltz is out, but is he actually just promoted? So it's been announced that he is going to instead be nominated to be the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. That means Secretary of State Marco Rubio will take on as the interim national security advisor. Does it sound like a promotion to you?
Well, I think maybe just recognizing that some people are better in other roles. So I think he's looking at his cabinet, he's thinking, look, this guy would be better for this position as opposed to being.
But we know he has some
position.
Controversy in the past, and very recent past, that leads up to this.
If they wanted to get rid of him, they would not be putting him in a Senate confirmation, another Senate confirmation position. This is clearly just adjusting things.
Are we shuffling chairs here?
Musical chairs at the White House. I think it's symptomatic of the first 100 days, which were absolute chaos. And, you know, there was a transgression of national security proportions, and somebody's head should have rolled. Took a little time to get there. They kicked him upstairs. And Mike's right. He's going to have to undergo another Senate confirmation hearing, and I'm not sure that's going to be good for him.
Oh, well, now there's much more to look into and many more questions this time as well.
Let's
talk about one of the things that I brought up with Congressman Meuser. It's the potential cuts to NPR and to PBS. This has been brought up as a potential for years. Now by executive order, they're getting into this. What's going to happen here? What do you think should happen?
Well, first of all, the federal government doesn't contribute that much to NPR or PBS. It's like 15% or 1% of one of them. So it's kind of irrelevant, but the sheer arrogance of saying, I'm just going to arbitrarily say we're ending funding to these two institutions that have provided a wonderful service to the country over the years makes no sense whatsoever. Such a tiny bit. And we're going to fire Big Bird from Sesame Street? Really? So I think that it's ridiculous.
Well, look, I think the taxpayers would be outraged if there was tax dollars going to fund Fox News, because they're viewed as a partisan. NPR and PBS are both partisan. Matter of fact, there's been studies that show like 70% of their content is pro-democratic. It can't be. It's like I've had this problem with Penn State before. If you want to be funded by the government, you can't be woke. You can't have woke policies. You can't do these things. You got to do it the right way, and they have not done it the right way. They have been partisan on all fronts. So I think they need to lose their funding.
Well, I don't want to belabor that particular subject, but I disagree completely. It's not woke to be compassionate, to teach children to be kind to each other, to talk about diversity at a young age. This is what they've been doing. This is not woke. This is about being a decent human being.
70% of their coverage is pro-democratic. 70%.
By that you mean Democrat providing for people, and caring about the poor
Well,
and
I
the
think
sick and the
he's talking
needy.
about NPR, you're talking about PBS. I think
Yeah.
there's the difference
Yeah,
there.
I am actually.
And maybe that is where they end up with this when they look through it all. We'll see. The Veterans Program that I also brought up with Congressman Meuser in particular, this would end mortgage rescue program that's out there. It's really working for people, and it happened right around the time of the pandemic. Republicans, a lot of them saying it's just too much taxpayer at risk. It's got to end somewhere. Where will this end, do you think?
Well, no one's talking about the new program, and there is a new program. And the reason that for the change is because the Biden administration and the VA completely botched their COVID mortgage forbearance program, which left veterans with tremendously high interest rates. So the new program is going to lower interest rates. But I think that where Trump needs to be careful is to make sure that it's open to all veterans, not just the ones who didn't participate in the forbearance program.
Does that sound fair?
Well, yes and no. I mean, blaming any of this on Biden makes no sense. The fact of the matter is that Trump came out and said, I'm going to terminate a program that might toss 20,000 veterans into the street. They're not going to be able to use their housing benefit. And, you know, we've got to remember that when you make these kind of cuts, when you brag about it with a chainsaw, you're affecting real people. And that's the situation in this case.
Joel, Republicans are the party of the American veteran. They are clearly the party of the American veteran. If you think for 1 second that our president or our Congress is going to let our veterans down, I don't think so.
I want to get to this then. Stocks. Should there be a block on these lawmakers being able to trade these stocks and potentially be ahead of the game when their own policies may impact what's going to happen with that stock's future? This bill is out, looks bipartisan. What do you say?
I think yes. I think the bill ought to pass. I think that it's one step away from insider trading, so I'm for it.
And they all end up millionaires after they're out of, Congress.
Isn't that interesting how you go in? You're a bartender, all of a sudden you got 90 million in the
bank. What about
bank.
this bill? What do you say?
I think it's great. They call it the Pelosi Act, by the way. It is
They
clearly
do, with their acronym, yeah.
it's clearly insider trading, and it should be. They should be prosecuted, number one, but it needs to be stopped by legislation, and I think that's what they're doing there.
Okay. We're not going to have too much time to get into this, but John Fetterman, there's a New York Magazine profile piece about him, says he's hard to work with. Some of his closest advisors have left. Is this new ground, or we've sort of been hearing about this?
John Fetterman's an interesting character. You know, he's very quirky. He has some very strong beliefs and things like that. And I just think that what we have to do is watch and wait and see what he does in the future.
You know, I dealt with him a lot when I was in the Senate. I think he was always an independent thinker.
Okay.
And I think he's doing what he thinks is right. And
I wonder if they had expectations that weren't met, and maybe that's part of the issue. Our expectation is to get ready for a big debate this week. We're previewing that next. Well, it's an exciting week here at CBS 21. We have a special Democratic debate for Harrisburg mayor. Some people watch politics for entertainment purposes. This may be one of those.
This might be one of those. Expect some fireworks.
Yeah.
Tune in. If you're interested at all in local politics, this is going to be a good show.
We have an incumbent. We have someone from the city council. There's always friction there. We have some other people with just some big ideas. Some people would say really interesting ideas.
Well, you know, one of the things I'm doing now is I have a security consulting firm. If you need any help, let me know, and I'll send some guys over.
I'm hoping not. We are not allowing in a crowd. It's a little too crowded in here to begin with. But make sure you guys are watching this. It is the Harrisburg mayoral debate. It is Wednesday, 7 o'clock, streaming live on CBS 21, Facebook, our YouTube pages. We are not going to stop this thing no matter what happens. So, yes, keep an eye on this.
You may be able to demonstrate what Will Rogers said one time, that I don't belong to any organized party. I'm a Democrat.
Either way,
watch for them to prove that.
But what we
concept.
do know is if you win the Democratic primary, you probably win the whole thing when it comes to Harrisburg.
For sure.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot for being here again, and may the 4th be with you.